Hello, my name is Marc Riera, and I will give a talk entitled Introduction Pathways Shape the Success of Non-Native Plants Along Landscape Gradients. In summary, introduction pathways are the human activities responsible for the introduction of non-native organisms. Examples in plants include gardening, agriculture, and forestry, which are pathways that introduce plants of economic value, either for cultivation as ornamentals or for food production. In contrast to these two intentional pathways, the unintentional pathway is responsible for introducing non-native plants accidentally. For example, seeds contaminating agricultural seed packages or seeds hitchhiking onto traded commodities. Introduction pathways are the processes that trigger biological invasions, and therefore they are key conservation targets. Nevertheless, we know little about how introduction pathways interact with other causal factors of biological invasions, such as temporal dynamics, landscape gradients, and plant traits. To fill this knowledge gap, we set out to answer three research questions. First, which are the long-term temporal dynamics in pathway importance? Second, how do pathways shape invasion success in combination with landscape gradients? And third, how do pathways shape invasion success in combination with plant traits? We answered this research question in the study area of Catalonia. Catalonia is a region located in the northeastern part of Spain and has a well-known non-native flora. Building on previous work, we drew data on the non-native flora of Catalonia as a whole from a recently published checklist. We also drew data on the Barcelona province, which you see outlined in red, from a published field sampling. To assess temporal dynamics in pathway importance, we gathered a contingency table, classifying over 1,000 plants into three introduction pathways: agriculture and forestry, gardening, and unintentional. And we classified plants into four introduction periods: before the year 1500, from 1500 to 1900, from 1900 to 1985, and from 1985 to the present day. For each introduction period, we calculated the proportion of plants introduced through each pathway and assessed how the proportion changed over time. To assess invasion success along landscape gradients, we drew data from a field sampling at the Barcelona province, with information on the presence and absence of non-native plants across more than 600 plots. We calculated two binary response variables, describing whether the plot was invaded by a plant introduced through the gardening or the unintentional pathway. These two variables described whether plants were successful at invading plots along landscape gradients. We related invasion by the gardening and the unintentional pathway to variables describing landscape gradients. These included a normalization gradient approximated through habitat type, considering three types of habitats: natural, cropland, or urban habitat. We also included topographical and climatic variables, and variables describing historical landscape. We fitted binomial generalized linear models and used multimodal inference to get model averaged effects. To assess invasion success and plant traits, we drew data from the same field sampling of the Barcelona province, with data on 77 non-native plants. We calculated two metrics of invasion success. On one hand, frequency, as the count of invaded plots. On the other hand, habitat range, as the count of invaded habitats. We related frequency and habitat range to introduction pathway, considering agriculture and forestry, gardening, and unintentional, and also modeled the effect of minimum residence time and selected plant traits. We fitted phylogenetic generalized least square models and used multimodal inference to get model averaged effects. All analyses were done in RStudio. we obtained the following results, which I present together with a discussion. Regarding temporal trends, the number of introduced non-native plants increased dramatically over time, and there were important dynamics in pathway importance. Over time, gardening rose in importance, going from less than half of all introductions to 75% of all introductions, while agriculture and forestry fell from being responsible for half of all introductions to being responsible for less than 10%. On the other hand, an intentional pathway fluctuated without a clear trend, ranging from 20 to 40% of new plant introductions. Regarding invasion success along landscape gradients, unintentional introductions successfully invaded urban and cropland habitats. Gardening plants invaded mostly in urban habitats. With increasing elevation, probability of invasion decreased, but more strongly for unintentional introduced plants compared to gardening ones. This suggests that gardening plants can reach higher elevations. Additional variables included in our models had very small effects. Therefore, habitat and elevation appear to be the main drivers of invasion success by pathways along landscape gradients. Regarding invasion success and plant traits, the most successful non-native plants were those with high residence time. In other words, those introduced a long time ago. Unintentional introductions were the ones that became the most geographically widespread and invaded the greatest number of habitats, although the model estimate was similar to gardening and agricultural and forestry plants. Additional traits included in our models had very small effects. There were interesting patterns of trait covariation. Unintentionally introduced plants had large native ranges, suggesting they can tolerate a wide range of conditions. And unintentionally introduced plants were mostly annuals, indicated that they tended to have fast life cycles, which could lead to faster spread or adaptation. I would like to conclude with some take-home messages. First, the relay dynamics in pathway importance mirror the transformation of society. The main motivation for cultivating plants has shifted from providing food for survival to cultivating plants for their beauty. Second, unintentional introductions might have decoupled partially from agricultural activity. We showed that unintentionally introduced plants were able to invade croplands and urban habitats to a greater extent than gardening introductions. Therefore, urban areas could be introduction epicenters for unintentionally introduced plants. Lastly, economic use is not a necessary condition for invasion success, as we showed that unintentionally introduced plants were as widespread and invaded as many habitats than those plants with economic use, which are the gardening and agriculture and forestry ones. The invasion success of unintentionally introduced plants could be related to trait covariation with wide ecological tolerance and fast life cycles, and the possession of a greater diversity of introduction epicenters. So that will be all. I would like to thank funding agencies and my supervisors and co-authors. And I would like to thank all of you for your attention. And if you have any questions, make sure to get in touch. Have a nice day. Goodbye.